Okay, so imagine this. It's 2023 and you're told you're about to witness history. Not just a journey to the bottom of the ocean, but a moment that redefines exploration, innovation, and human ambition. You're sitting there thinking this is going to be groundbreaking, not just for science, but for regular commercial submarine trip to the Titanic shipwreck. But instead, what you're actually watching unfold is something much more unfortunate and familiar. A slow motion collapse built on ego, shortcuts, and a very specific kind of person who believes the rules don't apply to them. That's the story at the center of Titan, the OceanGate Submersible disaster. And going into this documentary, I was expecting and hoping something that would really take us deeper, past the headlines, past the viral coverage, past the think pieces that we've all already consumed on the topic through the natural news cycle. Because let's be honest, the story has been everywhere. It's been analyzed, debated, broken down from every possible angle. So if you're going to make a documentary about it now, especially one that premiered at Tribeca eventually, the expectation is simple. Tell us something that we don't already know. And that's really where this film begins to lose me because, to be honest, it feels more like a news cycle video reel than an actual documentary. So, like I said, it premiered at Tribeca last June, which immediately sets a tone and an excitement around the film. That kind of platform usually signals intention, depth, and a certain level of storytelling, ambition, and vigor. So you go into expecting a documentary not just informative, but revelatory. And for a little while, it feels like we might get there. The strongest parts of the film are definitely the interviews. There are moments where you hear from people close to the situation, close to Stockton Rush, voices that add texture to the story, that give you a clearer sense of the culture surrounding OceanGate, the mindset behind the mission, and the warning signs that were there long before the disaster actually happened. Those moments work. They pull you in, they make you lean forward a bit. But the issue is the film doesn't build on them in any meaningful or formal way. Instead, it starts to loop backwards, actually. The same ideas, the same beats, the same conclusions, just repackaged over and over again. And after a while, what initially felt compelling starts to feel repetitive and stale. Then it starts to feel tedious. And that's a real problem for a documentary like this, because when you're dealing with a subject that has already been so heavily dissected across news coverage, social media, long-form journalism, even other documentaries, you can't afford to stay just on the surface. You have to go deeper. You have to uncover something new and unique, or at the very least, present the story through a sharper, more focused lens. But this film never quite gets there or commits to that deeper dive. It just kind of gestures towards it. It hints at it, but it never fully delivers. And because of that, the emotional impact starts to flatten out. You're not discovering, you're not revisiting, not in any way that feels intentional or illuminating, but in a way that feels padded. By the time you reach the final stretch of the documentary, the story starts to take on a very familiar shape. And honestly, that's when it really clicked for me, because what this ultimately feels like isn't a groundbreaking examination of a modern tragedy. It feels like another version of a story we've already seen play out over and over and over again. The story of a wealthy, self-assured figure who is so consumed by his own vision, so desperate for validation and praise, recognition, that he's willing to ignore reality to maintain that image. And a person who bends the truth when it's convenient, who reframes risks as innovation, who surrounds himself with just enough affirmation and just enough money to keep pushing forward, even when the warning signs are impossible to ignore. And the documentary touches on this, but it never fully dissects it. It shows you the outline of that personality, but it doesn't interrogate it in the way that would make this film feel essential. So by the end, instead of feeling like you've gained a deeper understanding of what happened or why it happened, you're left with something that feels strangely familiar, almost predictable. It becomes less about uncovering truth and more about reinforcing what we already suspected. And that's when the disappointment really sets in, because this story had the potential to be so much more than that. It could have been a deep psychological study, a critique of modern tech culture, something that caused multiple lives, a breakdown of how ambition, privilege, and unchecked authority can collide in catastrophic ways. But instead, it leans a little too heavily on the spectacle, on the surrounding noise of the tragedy, on the pieces of the story that have already been widely circulated and consumed, and in doing so, it misses the opportunity to really say something there. So what you're left with at the end of all this is a documentary that isn't necessarily bad, but It's not nearly as impactful as it could have been. It feels more like a collection of parts that's almost come together but never quite do. And more than anything, it feels like a reminder that sometimes the most frustrating stories actually aren't the ones that are hard to understand or the ones that are even that compelling. They're the ones that feel all too familiar, the ones where you can see exactly where it's going. And no one stops it anyway, and that, more than anything else, is what makes this one stick with you. Not because of what it reveals, but because of what it doesn't. This documentary is available on Netflix. Check